In 1405, 317 treasure ships, 9-masted giants, slipped out of Nanjing's morning fog. They blocked the Yangtze like a wall of wood and silk, crews stacked on decks, holds stuffed with porcelain, silk, and gunpowder. They crossed the Indian Ocean, traded with ports from Java to the Swahili coast, and came home with gold, spices, and a giraffe the court read as a lucky omen. Then the logs were burned. Charts vanished. The state acted as if the ocean never happened. Why would a rising empire erase its own ocean? People love big answers. Shadowy eunuchs, secret maps, aliens, if you scroll long enough. The real story cuts cleaner. A dynasty that clawed its way out of famine, built canals and codes, then chose control over risk, and paid for it when the wind turned. To see why those pages burned, start where the dynasty actually began, with a boy who buried his family in a plague and learned early that the world isn't gentle. November 1368. Nanjing isn't a palace yet, just red tents tied to rough beams along the river. Zhu Yuanzheng, a starved farmer-turned-monk-turned-rebel, pulls on yellow robes and names himself the Hongwu Emperor. The Mongol Yuan have ruled for nearly a century, squeezing the heartland with taxes and war. Now the banners turn red, the drums speak, and a new dynasty steps onto the stage. Zhu was born in 1328 in Anhui, in fields already failing. The Black Death burned through the 1340s. Entire villages emptied. His parents and brother went to pits without markers. At 16, he had nothing. He shaved his head and begged as a novice at a temple. He survived. In 1351, rebellion lit up the countryside. White Lotus preachers promised renewal. Rebels tied red cloth around their foreheads, and the Yuan suddenly had a fire they couldn't stamp out. Zhu enlisted under Guo Zixing. He didn't just survive. He moved. He married Guo's adopted daughter Ma, built a circle, and turned raiding bands into units that could hold a line. In 1356, he took Nanjing, a choke point on the river that could starve or feed half an empire. The fights were dirty and close. Haozhou, 1352, farm tools versus siege engines, ditches, night attacks, feints, winds that smelled like smoke and mud. The people are the root of the country, he would say later. Back then, the roots were rotting. Taxes spiked to cover epidemics and armies. Flooded fields looked like mirrors. Rage pooled behind the dikes. By 1363, Zhu took the knife to his own camp, edging out Guo's hold and consolidating power. Rivals tried him. Chen Yuliang threw everything into Poyang Lake, ships crowding a horizon of water. Zhu sent in fireships. Night turned orange. The lake boiled with broken hulls. The way to the throne opened. He didn't rise because heaven whispered his name. He rose because he was smart and ruthless when it mattered. He purged monks and officials he didn't trust. He took a promise, protect the people, and backed it with a system that could crush anyone who threatened it. When he took the throne in 1368, he rebuilt from the ground. He broke up elite estates and handed land to hundreds of thousands of farm families. He ordered canals dredged and irrigation rebuilt so the north wouldn't starve when the rain failed. He ran a census and set taxes that, on paper, matched capacity. He revived the civil service exams. If you could write the essays and quote the classics under pressure, you could climb from dirt to desk. Over time, tens of thousands earned top ranks through that ladder. He also wrote a law book that spoke plain. The Great Ming Code set rules from palace to village, what you could do, what you couldn't, and what it would cost you if you did it anyway. He wanted order people could feel under their feet. The fear never left. In 1380, he killed his chancellor, Hu Weiyang, accusing him of treason. The purge cut for years. Many thousands died. He built his own eyes and ears, the Jinyiwei, an imperial secret police, in embroidered uniforms, authorized to investigate, interrogate, and report back. They watched officials, merchants, scholars. People learned to lower their voice at banquets. There's the hinge. The man who lifted the poor into the system built a machine to choke anyone who might steer it off course. Before he died in 1398, he left advice for his heir that boiled down to this: trust no one. His grandson, Zhu Yunwen, took the name Jianwen and tried to calm the place down. Young, bookish, and intent on reining in the princes Hongwu had scattered across the map. One of those princes was his uncle, Zhu Di, the Prince of Yan, based in the north at Beijing. Zhu Di had troops, walls, and ambition. Jianwen moved to clip his wings. Zhu Di called it betrayal and moved. The civil war, Jingnan, clearing the troubles, wasn't banners and chivalry. It was sieges, scorched fields, and whispers. In 1402, Zhu Di's men set fire to the main hall in Nanjing. Jianwen disappeared in the smoke. Dead or escaped is still debated. The rumor that he lived would haunt his uncle for years. Heaven's will has changed, Zhu Di declared. He took the throne as the Yongle Emperor, eternal happiness, and began acting like it. He punished those who stood against him, kept the secret police close, and poured resources into making the capital match the court he wanted to project. In 1421, he moved the capital to Beijing and opened the Forbidden City, nearly 1,000 buildings, a city within a city raised by vast labor over 2 decades. Red walls, yellow roofs, axes aligned to heaven. It said, unshakable. It wasn't just stone and ceremony. Yongle rode north in person to break Mongol power and push the frontier back. He ordered a vast encyclopedia compiled. Thousands of old texts gathered into one set, knowledge curated under his authority. He rebuilt and extended fortifications in the north. He forced the state to breathe in his rhythm. He also did something that flexed to the world. He sent fleets to sea. The man he chose came from the empire's hard edges. Ma. He was born in Yunnan to a Muslim family. When Ming forces took the region, he was captured as a boy, castrated, and sent into palace service. He grew into a towering presence, physically imposing, sharp, loyal. Yongle renamed him Zheng He and gave him command of the water. The ships rose in the yards at Nanjing, timber bent and joined. Bulkheads sealed into watertight compartments, massive rudders hung at sterns. The first armada in 1405 left with hundreds of vessels, from small escorts to huge treasure ships carrying thousands of crew. They followed monsoon winds down the coast, across to Calicut and the Arabian Sea, and into ports along East Africa. The message wasn't conquest. It was centrality. We are here. Acknowledge it. Rulers along the route came out to meet them. Gifts exchanged. Titles recognized. At times, force made the point. In Ceylon, a local king tried an ambush and ended up on a Ming ship until tribute and terms were set. The fleets quelled pirates, traded for horses prized on the northern frontier, and returned with animals and goods that fed court theater. From Bengal came textiles, from the Swahili coast, ivory, and the giraffe that set courtiers buzzing. The Malkun charts recorded winds, stars, and coastlines with practical detail. Sailing masters got better with each trip. Ports learned Ming patterns, the flags, the rituals, the sweet spot where gifts turned into status. Back home, the spectacle reinforced Yongle's legitimacy. He had taken a throne in a fire. Every kneeling envoy was another brick in the story that heaven agreed. But the ocean wasn't his only worry. The frontier never slept. Building walls, buying horses, garrisoning passes, feeding the capital. None of that was cheap. And the rumor about Jianwen lingered. Yongle worried about threats he couldn't see. After Yongle died, the voyages continued under his successor, the Yongle Emperor, Zheng. He sailed again in the early 1430s and died during or shortly after that final voyage. Sources differ on where he was buried. Either way, when that fleet came back, the sentences started to change. No more giant ships, No more deep ocean. The yards shifted to riverboats. Files were archived. Then the archives thinned. This is where stories warp online. Claims that maps were stolen, that distances were covered nobody can substantiate, that Europe's age of sail rode on Ming charts. The clean version: the fleets went far. Evidence confirms East Africa. The state valued the ocean as theater and a network for tribute and influence. Then priorities shifted. Costs loomed. Threats, north and west, sharpened. Court voices argued the sea was a distraction, and the crown agreed. But the sea spectacle is only one strand. The bigger engine is how the Ming ran the machine, who steered, and how fear crept into the gears. Hongwu pulled talent from fields with exams and built surveillance around the throne. Yongle, who seized power, kept the heat on and expanded palace eunuchs, reach men without family lines, bound to the inner court. Their networks made the emperor faster and more insulated. Scholar officials wrote memorials arguing for measured policy. Eunuchs got orders done by dusk. That rivalry, books versus access, runs under everything that follows. By the 1430s, with Voyages ending and spending under scrutiny, the empire looked strong from afar. Fields watered, granaries replenished. The Forbidden City shone. Exam halls filled. The House of Ming felt permanent. Signs were already there that the balance was fragile. A child emperor, Zheng He, took the throne in 1435, steered by palace factions, especially the eunuch Wang Zhen. In 1449, they took the emperor north to inspect the frontier, a show that became disaster. Oirat cavalry under Asen Taishi outmaneuvered the Ming at Tumu. Supplies ran thin. Formations faltered. Panic spread. The army broke. The emperor was captured. The court panicked. A minister, Yu Qian, steadied the capital, made hard choices, and kept the state from imploding. The emperor returned later, but the bruise stayed. It said, the system could be blinded from the inside. Stack that against the decision to end ocean voyages. Imagine the math in a red-walled hall. An ocean spectacle that flatters the court but drains coffers. A northern border that eats money and men and can still collapse if you listen to the wrong voice. Eunuchs who can move a boy emperor into the field for optics. Scholar officials arguing that foreign contact changes things, and change is risk. The safest call was to close the door. Beijing, 1420. The Forbidden City opens. A red and gold labyrinth aligned to the pole star, nearly 1,000 buildings lifted by years of conscripted labor. Yellow tiles flash in the sun. Moats hold the sky like mirrors. It doesn't just announce a capital, it announces permanence. Yongle rides north with cannon and cavalry to batter the steppe. South and east, Zheng He's armadas stitch a sea road of ritual and reputation, port by port, wind by wind. In the center, the court inhales tribute and exhales edicts. It looks like an empire that can do everything at once. Under the lacquer, the gears grind. A minister, brush steady, tone respectful, warns that fleets cost too much, the frontier eats men and silver, and palaces drain labor from fields. A eunuch counters, ships by prestige and police pirates. The emperor's presence keeps the steppe honest. The palaces are the face of the state. Both are right. That is the problem. The sea story crests and recedes. In the early 1430s, the last grand voyage sails and returns. Zing. He dies on the route or soon after. His lieutenants come home. The crown turns inward. Shipyards shift from treasure ships to rivercraft. Files are archived. Then the archives thin. The usable truth is cleaner. Priorities shifted, costs bit, threats sharpened, and the political ground favored caution. The ocean stops being a stage and becomes a risk. Caution hardens into habit. Surveillance widens. The Jinyue and the eunuch-run eastern and western depots operate as parallel channels to the official ministries. Scholar officials argue with ink and precedent. Eunuchs carry whispers and get action by dusk. If you seized a throne in fire, speed and loyalty feel safer than debate. But speed can carry you into walls. In 1449, the wall arrives. The boy Emperor Zheng He rides north with a massive army, pushed by Wang Zhen. Essen Taishi doesn't blink. At Tumu, supplies run thin, formations falter, panic spreads. The army breaks. The emperor is captured. Beijing freezes. It could be the end. Yu Qian, a hard-edged minister, steadies the capital. He refuses ruinous ransom, fortifies the passes, and installs the emperor's brother as the Jingtai emperor to keep the state breathing. When the captured emperor returns, the knives come out. Purges. Reversals. Yu Qian is executed when the pendulum swings. The lesson lands. The sinner is strong until the wrong voice whispers in the wrong ear. The state answers stress by building more of what it knows how to build. Walls rise and are rebuilt along strategic ridges. Earth and brick, patrol roads and beacon towers. The tourist photo of the Great Wall compresses centuries. The Ming contribution is the stone and brick musculature designed to move troops and throw warning fire down the line. Insurance against the grasslands. Insurance is expensive. Troops on paper number high. In practice, the picture is complicated. Military colonies farm and fight. Muster rolls swell. Commanders skim. Long borders dilute discipline. Guns spread. Hand cannons, matchlocks, but training and logistics lag. Reforms surge after defeats and fade in quiet years. The machine lurches between urgency and drift. Inside, industry hums and frays. At Jingdezhen, kilns beat a rhythm. Blue and white porcelain, at a scale no rival matches. Cobalt vines under glaze curl like running water. Imperial marks stamp bowls bound for palace tables and farm markets. Silk and lacquer workshops turn out wealth that doubles as image. The court's taste travels with the goods, not just pretty things. Tax pipes and prestige. Exam halls fill again and again. Thousands of stalls, ink, brushes, hope. The system lifts bright minds from villages into offices with seals. It also trains them to revere order and precedent. That ethic can stabilize a continent. It can also stiffen into a reflex against change. When something truly new knocks, the first instinct is to stretch an old answer to fit. That reflex will matter when money changes shape. Mid-century, consolidation and rot grow in the same soil. Jia Jing takes the throne in 1521, a teenager who grows into a long reign of ritual and retreat. Taoist alchemy fumes in palace courtyards. A fire breaks out one night from experiments promising immortality and delivering smoke. Outside, coastal raiders cut and run. Northern riders probe and pull back. The empire absorbs shocks and sags. Numbers on paper look reassuring. Budgets expand. Armies are listed. Wall miles are tallied. Line items can lie. Officers pocket stipends for phantom troops. Work crews are drafted on schedules that leave fields unplanted. Taxes push farmers into debt. Debt pushes them off land. Land slides to men who know how to make the system blink. A stingier sky widens every crack. Then silver walks in the door. In the late 1500s, Spanish galleons run between Manila and China, trading American silver for Chinese goods. The inflow is massive. Silver becomes the lifeblood of tax and trade. Prices inch up, then jump. Wages lag. A state calibrated for grain and labor levies tries to pivot to metal. It doesn't pivot fast enough. A strong manager forces alignment. Zhang Zheng, regent for the young Yongle Emperor in the 1570s, audits and consolidates. He pushes the single whip reform, commuting tangled obligations into a single silver tax, and drags local administrations toward discipline. He pairs waste, strengthens defenses, and for a stretch, the machine purrs. Fields produce, the frontier quiets, revenue lines smooth. He dies in 1582. Rivals pull down parts of the scaffolding. His allies are punished. The signal to ambitious officials is simple. Fix the machine and expect a knife under your ribs after the funeral. That is how drift sets in. Wanli starts engaged and sours into absence. A long stalemate with factions he cannot bend. Memorials pile. Decision stall. You can run a great engine on momentum for a while. Not forever. External shocks exploit internal drift. In 1592, Japan invades Korea. Ming sends large armies into a grinding war against disciplined musketeers. There are victories. Pyongyang retaken. Enemy advances blunted. And an end without triumph. The cost is steep in lives and silver. The metal that looked like rescue becomes a lever that moves prices and expectations out of joint. Then the weather leans cold. The Little Ice Age tightens growing seasons. Droughts bite in the northwest. Crops fail, then fail again. Famine is not only hunger, it is movement. People leave fields, pack roads, and crowd city gates. Banditry grows from hungry men with no options. At court, the rivalry isn't quiet. When emperors lean away from work, eunuchs become the gate. Under the 1620s, Yongle Emperor Wei Zongxian runs the eastern depot like a state within a state. Purges bite deep. Fear stiffens the bureaucracy into compliance. Terror is governance. Chongzhen takes the throne in 1627 and tries to reclaim authority. He breaks eunuch networks, thousands punished or executed, and wants a reset. Resets need time and money. Both are short. Disruptions to Manila routes pinch silver. Tax shortfalls multiply. Soldiers go unpaid. Rim lands fray. In the northeast, the Jurchen reorganize under Nurhaci and Hong Taiji into a banner state, the Manchus, soon enough. They don't just raid. They build an alternative order, with discipline, narrative, and a magnet that pulls defectors from Ming garrisons starved of pay. A line that felt permanent begins to shimmer. Step back and read the pattern without noise. At peak, the Ming looks redundant. Twin capitals and canals, walls and beacons, exams and surveillance, court and parallel court. Redundancy makes systems robust against single shocks. When shocks synchronize, redundancy becomes weight. Synchronization is what the late 1500s and early 1600s deliver. Money shifts to silver faster than the tax state can digest. Climate squeezes harvests while obligations stay fixed. External wars hit as internal reform reverses. Leadership gaps coincide with bureaucratic fear. Eunuch dominance peaks just as trust is most needed. Where does the ocean fit? Maritime engagement could have cushioned shocks, steady external trade, diversified revenue, information exchange, foreign know-how absorbed into domestic practice. The Ming didn't choose that path. The ocean was theater, then the lights went out. Later, private commerce and smuggling fill coastal gaps, and the state treats them as problems to police as much as valves to open. Inside a Confucian order, wary of uncontrolled contact, that caution has logic. It also has costs. Even where the state adapts, it often adapts halfway. Matchlocks show up. Training lags. Silver taxes are standardized. Enforcement is uneven. Walls are extended. Mobile response is underfunded. Reformers succeed. They are punished after the funeral. Every half measure keeps the machine running and builds fragility into the foundation. Drop into a village, and the abstraction turns to grit. Shanxi in a drought year. The riverbed is a line of polished stones. The well is a dark ring with nothing at the bottom. A tax collector arrives with a tablet and 2 guards. He does not care that the crop failed. The assessment is last year's, and last year's didn't care about rain either. You sell tools. You borrow. You fall behind. Your son leaves to haul stone for a wall 200 miles away. A band comes through at night and takes a goat. You hide what you have and stop answering knocks. Someone says a leader has raised a banner, righteous army, equal shares, new mandate. He promises tax relief and food. Your son listens. Repeat that across counties. Bandits become rebels. Rebels become contenders. The court's reach is long on paper and thin in the field. The center issues an edict. The county has no men to carry it out. A general defects because his pay is months late. Another because his family is threatened. The map changes color at the edges before anyone at the top reads the memo. Do we know that keeping great fleets would have prevented this cascade? No, hindsight loves certainty. History doesn't. But when a state closes one avenue of flexibility early, it owes itself a plan to make the rest of the system supple. The Ming chose rigidity as virtue. Rigid things stand straight until they don't. This is not only decline. The mid-late Ming produces art and thought that still breathe. Painters find space in ink and blank paper. Potters riff with glaze like music. Compilers map plants and medicines that help for centuries. Cities hum. Commercial presses spread books. A play about a woman who studies in secret and tops the exams lands because the latter is that real. A merchant in Suzhou funds a bridge that carries strangers today. Strength and fragility sit at the same table. And yet, when men argue in the capital about budgets, they reach for the past more than for the world as it is. What worked under Hongwu? What the ancients advised? Which line in the classics can be folded over a new problem to make it seem old? That is the knife edge, where gravitas turns into gravity. Dusk creeps along a ridge. A rider comes hard from the west. He hands a message to a garrison captain who marks a board and lights a brazier. Fire leaps to dry brush. A chain of beacons glows down the spine of the land, a pulse that moves faster than a horse. In Beijing, the pulse arrives as a drumbeat at a gate and an officer's bow in a hall lit by oil lamps. He asks for grain allotments to be released, for matchlock barrels to be relined, for pay to be brought current. The minister he addresses knows the ledgers. He knows where the silver is stuck, who is blocking which disbursement, and how many petitions sit under the emperor's brush. He also knows what happened to the last man who pushed too hard. He promises what he can, and sends the officer away with a stamped paper, and the knowledge that stamps do not move carts. That is the rhythm of the late peak. Fast signals, slow response. When response slows too much, signals become fires that do not go out. The line holds, then flexes, then frays. The center writes, then waits, then wonders why the drums at the gate do not match the numbers on the page. The ocean is quiet. The walls are tall. The exams are full. The kilns are hot. The ledgers balance until they don't. In the next breath, the synchronized shocks converge. Rebels at the gates, a court low on oxygen, a general standing at Shanghai Pass with two disasters and one choice. And after the choice, a different banner rises over the same walls, while the Ming's shape lingers in porcelain, in tests, in the way a palace hall tells your body how to walk. Spring 1644 breaks cold over the northern plain. Grain wagons creak late. Pay chests arrive light or not at all. In the capital, Chongzhen has been awake too many nights, the brush in his hand a metronome of orders that leaves slower than trouble arrives. He has killed the eunuchs who strangled the court. He has cut officials who lied to his face. He has tried, which is its own exhaustion when the machine beneath you no longer answers. Out in the hills, Li Zicheng moves on roads never meant for armies. Roads worn by refugees and peddlers, now trodden by men who took up pikes because taxes outlived crops. His banners promise what the court no longer can. Lighter burdens, food tomorrow, revenge today. Garrison after garrison calculates odds and opens gates. Word outruns the column. The dashing king is coming. Some cheer, some hide, some draft memorials and never send them. On an April night, the wind stacks dust against Beijing's walls. At dawn, the gates do not hold. The city gives first a hinge, then a door, then the hall where emperors have bowed to heaven. Looters move like a river through carved screens and lacquered chests. Porcelain breaks as easily as bone. Guards paid last season shift to the stronger tide. Somewhere in the warren of halls, Chongzhen finds a length of silk, walks up Coal Hill, and ties a knot that ends one story and signals another. When they untangle him in the morning light, the empire of states still exists on paper. On the ground, A different map is already being drawn. At Shanghai Pass, where the wall drops to the sea, a commander named Wu Sangui holds a keyhole. Behind him, families afraid of what's coming. Before him, Li Zicheng's men, hungry and rough. To his east and north, riders with shaved foreheads and long braids, the Manchus, wait like a second choice that will not forgive being chosen second. Later accounts say Li seized Wu's favorite, the courtesan Chen Yuanyuan, as leverage. Maybe that tipped the scale. Maybe the scale was already loading with years of missed pay and broken promises. Wu opens the gates to the Manchus. Dorgan leads the charge. Beijing turns again, the banners now a different color, the Q a sign of who holds tomorrow. In the south, pockets of Ming loyalty flare and gutter. Princes claim reign titles that last a season. The Hongwu Emperor is enthroned in Fuzhou and dead within a year. A fleet commander, Zhang Zilong's son, Koxinga, drives the Dutch from Taiwan and carves a redoubt on the island. Then dies young. The project passed to men who can only hold what they can reach by sail. By the late 1640s, cities from Yangzhou to Jiading learn what conquest means when soldiers are paid in coin and permission. Numbers multiply in stories because horror does. The real number is this: one dynasty's writ no longer holds. So why did a state that could command 1 million hands to lift a palace run out of fingers to hold a sword? The answers are not tidy and not new. Fear made policy curl inward. The Great Ocean moment was framed as theater and then as threat. When money turned to silver, the state accepted the coin, but not the world that came with it. When a manager proved reform could work, the system punished his success after his funeral. When guns appeared in enemy hands in Korea, the court bought barrels, but not the training cycles behind them. When the frontier signaled fire, the center sent memos into wind. When famine pressed villagers to the road, the court sent a tax bill. When the boy emperor needed a hand on his shoulder, a eunuch pushed him onto a horse and into a disaster. When Shongzhen asked for loyalty, the only men who could give it were too far away and too broke to move. Not everything collapsed. Some things shifted their weight forward into the next century. Walk the Forbidden City today, and you can still feel Yongle's geometry under your feet. The axial line, the climb of courtyards, the way space instructs your body to slow. 9,999 rooms is a legend you can't verify in an afternoon. But the point isn't the count, it's the intent. A palace designed to ritualize power. It still works. Millions shuffle through halls their ancestors would have seen only in paintings, and the view from the top stairs still steals breath. Pick up a Ming bowl, white body, cobalt brushed in vines and waves. Whether in a museum or a modern copy in a market, it carries a memory of hands and fire. The blue and white traveled farther than any fleet the state allowed. Dutch potters copied it and made an industry of imitation. A tea set on a Boston sideboard is a line back to Jingdezhen's kilns. Commerce found its own ocean, and the dynasty's mark, stylized under a glaze, outlived the dynasty's law. Look at the exam hall grid in an old print. Thousands of little cells where men sat with brushes and ink and hope. The content of the essays changed. The will to climb did not. Modern tests don't quote Mencius, but the idea that the state can find talent anywhere and pull it up still animates 1 billion mornings. Hongwu's ladder survived falls he did not predict. It still lifts and sifts. Run your finger along a wallstone at Bedeling or Jinshanling. It is not a symbol. It is a job someone did, long ago, when the order came and the village headman read the names. Modern measures wrap all the walls under one number and call it close to a small planet's circumference. The Ming took their stretch and made it brick and signal and patrol road. It failed to stop a conquest because walls never stop everything. It succeeded in buying time and structure because walls always buy something if you man them. The idea, prepare for the wind you can see even if you cannot see the storm behind it, was sound. The execution was a burden paid with children's backs. And the ocean? The maps we have. The Mao Kun routes, shipyard remnants along Nanjing's banks, records in the Yongle Emperor and related compilations, sit in glass and on microfilm. Stand by the river and watch barges push into the current. It takes little imagination to see how far those junks could have gone with a different brief. The question isn't could. They did go far. The question is, what next? The answer the court gave was nothing. That answer cast a long shadow. It's tempting to draw a clean chain from burned logs to fallen walls. History doesn't reward neatness that much. The treasure ship logs didn't break the army at Tumu, an enemy did. The enemy didn't take Beijing because Zheng He died. They took Beijing because a social contract snapped and a general opened a gate. And still there is a link. When a state strips away one source of flexibility, it owes itself a plan to make the rest of the system supple. The Ming chose rigidity as virtue. Rigid things stand up straight until they don't. There's an irony worth holding. The dynasty that started with a hungry boy in a robe, begging at a temple door, built a system that could pull boys like him into offices with seals. It also built a fear that those boys, once seated, might move too fast, say too much, or bring in air from outside. The engine that lifted became the governor that slowed. The governor that slowed became the brake that locked. The brake that locked became the crack in the axle. At the end, after banners change and hair is cut in queues under compulsion, people still plant in fire kilns and sit for tests and whisper about taxes. A conqueror can flip a flag in a season. The deeper habits take longer to shake. That is why the Ming shape stays under the next dynasty, like a foundation you can't pry up without tearing down the house. Stand again at Nanjing's old yards. The river is the same river. In the mud, archaeologists pull timbers with mortises cut to fit ribs you can't see now. They measure, infer, and argue over the exact length of a ship everyone estimates but no one has fully found. They argue because the human part of the story won't let the number sit. We want the ship to be as big as our regret. If you prefer your endings clean, the Ming doesn't give you one. It offers a ledger, canals dug, codes written, exams revived, fleets launched, fleets ended, walls raised, cities lost, a rope on a hill, a gate opened to riders in fur-lined coats. It offers a mirror. What do states do when they fear what contact will do to control? What do leaders do when the fastest messenger is the most dangerous advisor? When the books say one thing and the weather says another, which do you change? Were they visionaries who could have ruled the seas, or realists who knew the ocean would tear their center apart? Did ending the voyages buy time to harden the frontier, or rob them of the trade and ideas that might have cushioned the blows to come? If the dragon had kept its wings, would it have soared or fallen faster from a higher sky? Maybe the most honest answer is the one the records edge toward without saying. They chose the smaller world they could command over the larger world they could not. It worked until the smaller world itself changed shape under their feet. So ask yourself, when the wind shifts and the old maps stop fitting, do you light more beacons and thicken the walls, or do you raise a sail and risk what comes over the horizon? Which choice would you have made, and which one would you live with when the drums at the gate start to roll?